let's shall we kick it off here, gang?
Oh, yay.
Yeah, dude. All right. Welcome to the Lady J Meet Dudes. I'm Evan.
Tyler.
Charlie.
And today we have a super special guest, man, one of our buddies, Chris Tanghe. So Chris is a Master Sommelier. And so you grew up on the East Coast. He's kind of worked all over the U.S., especially here in Seattle as well. Worked at some really cool restaurants in Seattle. We'll have him talk about. But Chris, welcome. Thank you for doing this, man. We're super excited to taste some wine, pair it with meat, and really pick your brain, man, and have some fun today.
Yeah.
So how you doing?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, super stoked to be here. I love having you guys in the neighborhood, and talking meat because I like to cook as well. I have a cooking background before I was a sommelier.
Okay.
So I have a big passion for it, and love to experiment with unusual pairings and things like that. So that's what we're focusing on today. Is instead of the old slab in a cab, we're gonna focus on some different things that you can mix it up with, especially for the summertime, because when it's 85 or 90 degrees out, I don't want to be drinking Cabernet. I want to be drinking something that's more refreshing, and there's actually a ton of wines that work really well with a whole host of meats and grilling and smoking and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that's what we're gonna look at today.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I mean, that's really what we're looking for, because we have such a unique crowd here, man. They're always looking for something different. We have our meat cases. You shop at our meat case. We have all the different cuts. We talk about like the Hollywood cuts, right? The tenderloins, the New Yorks, and the ribeyes. That's kind of like the Cabernets and the Merlots, right? But we were looking for like the Zabutons and the Toros and all that unique stuff, So it's really cool to have you here, man. And with your background, I mean, it's just insane. We were just talking about it the other day. Can you give us a little bit of perspective on the wine, the Master Sommelier test, and really kind of what that was like, just to kick it off, so people have an idea about what you've gone through and what you've accomplished? Yeah.
So there are currently about 260 or 70-ish in the world, and it's a certification that's put on by an organization called the Court of Master Sommeliers that actually started in England, and then they opened an American chapter in the 70s. To me, it was just a really great way, a structured way to see what I was made of and how I could better myself as a hospitality professional. I started actually dishwashing many moons ago when I was in high school, and then went to culinary school at the CIA, and then that's actually when I first got involved in the CMS programming, but actually couldn't take the test because I wasn't 21 yet. I was 18, and they told me to get lost, and I had to go back after school and do it then. And it just kind of slowly but surely evolved from there. And I took one level at a time, and again, just to see if I could do it more than anything else. It of course, has opened a lot of doors and all that, but it's definitely not a golden ticket. Like, it's a great accomplishment, and I don't want to diminish that, but it's really, to stay relevant in this business, you need to continually challenge yourself.
Yep.
To learn and evolve with the...
Oh, we'll wait for the garbage truck to pass by. Real talk out here, baby, at the Lady J patio.
It's the nicest alley in West Seattle.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's very, very highly trafficked. All right, so let's get back into it here. Those trucks have politely passed by after about 5 minutes. So let's kick it off here. So you're talking about the test, and what it was like to kind of go through that whole process.
Yeah, so I started after culinary school and just worked my way one by one through each level. There's 4 levels. Okay. At the upper levels, it's a 3-part exam. So there's a theory portion, and then there's service and tasting. And tasting was the biggest challenge for me. But it's because there's so many variables, theory is very, very binary. Either you put in the work or you don't. Service, I did it every night on the floor when I was in restaurants, so that came second nature. And then tasting, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's the one that a lot of people fail. So there is a documentary out called Somm that was released many moons ago at this stage, and there's been successive ones if you have an interest in kind of getting a better sense of the exam. But yeah, it was. I was glad I did it, and I continue to teach and pay it forward and all that kind of good stuff. So
Has anybody passed it on the first try?
yes, there are 13 people, I think. It's called Krug Cupping It.
270.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was almost one, but I was a dumbass and changed one of my wines in my flight at the last 10 seconds, and it cost me the exam. Yeah.
Dude.
So it was bad, but at the same time, I really wasn't at the level where I needed to be a master level taster. So I spent the next year really dialing that in, and I was better for it in the end. And
So you took it twice.
That's
I
cool.
took it twice. Yeah, but
That's really fast.
It is. Yeah, not to toot my own horn. It is pretty fast. 13 have done it once. I only took them once. I don't know how many have only taken twice, but it's probably a relatively small number. And then there are some folks that, have test anxiety or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think the record is like 13 or something.
Hey, never quit, man.
Dude, that is persistence.
Wow.
That's perseverance. Yeah, I have nothing but respect for it. And honestly, the
cool,
people
man.
that took it a lot of times, I have so much respect for, because at the end of the day, they're like some of the sharpest ones out there because they've done it so many times and they had to stay on top of their game for so long.
Oh, yeah.
The people that get through quick, actually, depending on the person, there's some that just stop studying, right?
Yeah.
And then they're actually not that great, so to get through fast is not necessarily the best thing, but for me it worked out that way. But I work in education, and I think it's really important to stay current, informed, blah blah blah. So
How do you stay sharp?
well, it's part of my day job, so that's nice. I teach sommeliers at various levels, anywhere from beginners to experts on a given subject. So I'll lecture for 3 hours on that subject, and so I need to know my shit backwards and forwards, and so that keeps me sharp. And I just have a genuine interest in it, because that's one of the coolest things about this business is it changes so rapidly. Every year there's a new vintage, right? Yeah. Every year there's new producers. There's a new next generation taking over the family winery. There's all sorts of stuff happening. So to me, that's the fun bit, is like the constant rapid evolution, which happens in every field, but not as fast as you see it in the wine business generally. So, yeah.
Dude, that's crazy. Wow. So, Google Master Somm and look at some of those test things that they have to do, because it is like really, really honestly incredible what you have to know and what you have to do to get through that. So Chris, man, what are some maybe general guidelines for pairing meat and wine? Maybe some that are more outdated and what are some maybe newer ones that people should kind of look for?
Yeah, I love covering the outdated ones first,
for
sure. So there's a lot of voodoo around food and wine pairing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to put that out there first, that it's not as intimidating as a lot of people think it is. What is first and foremost the paramount thing to think about is that you should drink wines that you like, okay?
Yep.
It doesn't have to pair, okay? If you love Malbec and you love oysters and you want to have those together and you're cool with that, good on you. Do it. Do whatever makes you happy. Don't stress about getting the food and wine pairing right, quote unquote right, okay? There really, at the end of the day, is no right and wrong. It's about having a good time and making you happy, right? Yeah. So that being said, I think the next rule is to occasionally push yourself to try things that you're not used to drinking as well, because those can bring unexpected pleasure and cool experiences, right? So if you are, again, to bring up Malbec, a Malbec only person, awesome. Well, maybe you should try, Syrah, for instance. A lot of similarities to Malbec in terms of the fruit characteristics and the structure of the wine in terms of tannin and acid and all that kind of good stuff. So, to try something that is similar but slightly different to get you out of your comfort zone is a fun exercise. And also trying things that you've just never had before. I always encourage people to develop a relationship either with the sommelier, if there is one, or beverage professional at a couple of your favorite restaurants, or at your local wine shop, to say, this is what I normally drink, but I'm excited to try something different. What do you think? And be open to those experiences, and also be understanding that not everyone's going to be a home run, right? Totally. And that's part of the process, is discovering things you also don't like, right? So that's the most important thing. Beyond that, there's some simple principles that you can put into practice, which would be understanding the structural elements of wine, which sounds complicated, but it's really not. Okay, so the main ones would be acid. All right, so you can equate that to taking a lemon wedge, popping it in your mouth, and getting that experience, right? Mm-hmm. What does that do to you? It first makes your whole mouth pucker up and almost dry up in a way, and then your salivary glands realize what's going on, and like, holy shit, and all of a sudden they start gushing, right? So that's the effect of acid, is it first kind of shocks your palate and then makes you salivate, right? When you salivate, in your saliva, there's something that goes on a chemical level where there's proteins that bind with proteins. So proteins in your saliva that bind with proteins in whatever you're eating, right?
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
This is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have to get into the nerdy chemistry side of it, but just to know that like there is interactions going on with your tongue, your gums, your saliva, of course your olfactory and your general sense of taste, along with the wine and the food, that can really make for a fun experience, or in some cases a terrible experience. Sure. Okay, so there are very few hard and fast rules that I would implement with food and wine pairing. One for sure is that you don't want to eat spicy food with an alcoholic wine. Okay, because the alcohol just accentuates the spice and vice versa. So you just blow yourself. Yeah, you blast off. You just blow yourself out. You know, you're just like, oh, it's so much hotter, and the booze, you know, the wine's like tastes like, you know, Everclear, and you're just like, this sucks. You know, it's not an enjoyable experience. So, but beyond that, honestly, there's really no other hard and fast rule for food and wine pairing. And by learning things like structure, like acid, help you inform what could work that you wouldn't possibly think would work. So the next thing beyond acid for structure is tannin. So tannins are present mainly in red wines. They're a type of phenolic that comes from skins, stems, and seeds, and sometimes from oak. And those tannins will pair well with protein, okay, on your palate. So they essentially will match up chemically, like I was speaking to earlier, with certain proteins in your saliva, et cetera. But this is even more kind of an obvious marriage of texture, right? So they help tame the protein of the meat, in this case, that we're talking about today, will help tame those tannins. Okay, so if you look at real tannic varieties like Cabernet, Nebbiolo, things like that, it's a classic pairing for, you know, anything protein driven, especially beef. All right, so that's a good guideline.
Yeah.
What's that?
Red meat.
Yeah, and red meats. But you could apply that to duck. You could apply that to all sorts of things, right? So that's another kind of basic rule, right? Okay. Proteins and tannin work great. Acid and tannin, acid and protein, not necessarily everything. Acid is plays a role in clearing the palate off. So generally that applies to fat, right? So the fattier the cut, generally the more acid that you want, or fattier the sauce, or whatever have you. That's a kind of good rule of thumb, but it's not the be all end all. Really good food and wine pairing is all about nuance. Okay, so experiment. That's why you have to experiment. There's nothing I can really tell you other than don't eat spicy with an alcoholic wine. There's really nothing beyond that I can really tell you is going to be a home run every time, because you look at one ingredient added to a dish, say saffron, for instance, right? Say you're making like a paella, right? And you've got fatty sausage, smoked, chorizo or something like that, right? But you've also got seafood going on, all that other stuff. There's so many ingredients in that dish. Plus you add saffron, which is generally a challenging kind of wine pairing thing. You really just need to experiment and see what works, because you don't know how much saffron was added. You don't know how long it was steeped for in the stock. There's so many, this as a cook, right? There's so many different expressions of, say, a saffron infused stock that you use to cook paella with.
So overpowering if you're not careful.
Exactly, right?
Blah.
Yeah, so you need to, it's really just about trying it. So you just need to be open to experimenting with it. So I picked some things out today to demonstrate this that you would probably never think go together, okay? Because everyone's go-to, as we talked about, because of the protein and tannin deal, is that, funny saying, a slab in a cab, okay, or something similar. But the reality is we can look at other elements of beef in this case, and we can say, what cut is this, right? Is this a super fatty cut? Is this super lean cut? Okay, so that's baseline one. Then we can look at the preparation. Is this going to be grilled and have a bunch of smoky flavors? Or is this going to be braised? Is it going to be pan roasted, cast iron? You have to really think about the cooking technique, which will have such an impact on flavor and texture. So you start with the raw thing itself. How fatty is it? How meaty is it? What cut is it? How gamey is it, right? Then we look at the preparation. Then we look at how it's going to be finished. Are you just going to just cook that and like eat it on its own because it's so delicious and badass, right? Which is, as we know, like with really great cuts, it's really all you need.
Yeah, totally.
Salt, pepper, cook it, done, right? Totally. Or are you going to add something else onto it? So the first wine that I picked for today is actually champagne. So this is a producer called, one of my favorites, L'Armandier Bernier. And this is a certain style of champagne. So when you think of champagne, there's two main approaches. There's what's called reductive and oxidative. Reductive just means you're very careful with oxygen exposure during the winemaking process, and you want it to be very bright and almost like floral and very perfumed, right? And pretty linear on the palate, like very precise. Or you can add some neutral oak or things like that, more yeast contact, and you can create a very rich style. And when you're adding like oak and things like that, we call that oxidative because there is going to be a little bit of oxygen exposure. Okay. All right. So I think oxidative styles of champagne work really awesome with steak because you have the richness of oak, of extended lees contact, and it goes through a process called autolysis. You don't need to worry about that, but it's just what gives champagne that toasty, brioche, nutty type thing going on.
I want some A5 with this.
Oh, do you?
100%. So looking at something that's fattier, right? Either through the raising of it, right? An A5 with immense amounts of fat, right? And we have all the acid to kind of clean the palate after every bite. I mean, that's the thing with A5, right? When you eat it, it's like, whoa, this is intense, right? Yes. And that fat just covers your tongue and it covers everything in your palate, and you're like, wow, I think I can have 3 bites of this if you were just eating that alone. Yeah. But you add something like this, and it's like, oh no, it's like hitting the reset button every time you take a bite and it's it.
Get your foie gras in
Dude.
there.
So you tell me I can eat a pound of A5 with a little bit of this? Let's go.
Okay.
And then you
reset.
Accepted.
Yeah, and then you puke all over the floor.
It's
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, you can look at the raw protein itself is A5, or maybe it's something else like I don't know, brisket or something.
Sure. Okay.
Right? It doesn't necessarily need to be something as extravagant as A5, but I think that is like a really great example for this type of pairing, because you can utilize the richness of the oak, the autolysis, et cetera, and the refreshing factor of the acid to totally work with that. Okay, so it's thinking about texture and weight and fat, and how that reacts with wine.
That's crazy because you don't really think about pairing champagne with brisket. Like that's cool. I've never that doesn't come to mind, but yeah, it totally does, right? Because it's so rich. This is gonna cut that richness, cut that fattiness, and reset.
Yeah, it's just about really prepping your palate for the next bite, and to have the wine not clash with the food. Those are the most important things, really. Okay. Now, there's lots of nuances you can do in terms of the preparation to really make the wine work. Like if you really wanted to really dial it in, you could create a sauce for the steak, right? And you could use
for specific notes in the wine, maybe a little toasted fennel or whatever it is, right? That's like
totally. You could use notes like taste the wine before, get a sense of what it's showing, or you could actually use the wine in the preparation itself. That's called bridging. So say you were to make a sauce, right? And just for whatever simplicity's sake, say you're going to make a Béarnaise sauce, right? Let's go ultra classic. Sure. So yeah. When's the last time you made Béarnaise?
That's what we do here.
I love Béarnaise.
Yeah.
Delicious. I love it.
Actually, I had it recently for the first time in a long time. It is fucking delicious.
Oh, I bet it is.
Yes.
But it is just very old school. But just for their purposes today, for explanation, you need to make some kind of reduction for that, right? So you normally make a reduction with tarragon, shallot, and like some kind of acidic base. You can make it with wine, right? So if you took a little bit of this, and you don't need much, like a cup or whatever, you make your reduction. Now you're folding some of those flavors, actually, the wine itself into the sauce, and so now when you taste them together, it's more likely, likely to go together. Yeah. So that's another way.
With like a really nice poached egg and a little garlicky lacinato kale or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
Hey.
Yeah.
Duck ham.
Duck ham,
absolutely.
bro.
So many things. Or like,
Dude, duck ham. That sounds good.
I had a duck ham recently with like walnuts and a walnut sauce, like a tarator.
Oh.
And that works killer with champagne because you get all the nuttiness and the lees contact with the wine and everything.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Ooh. So how would you taste this champagne? Like take us through just a quick 101 of like how you
Sure.
taste this.
Yeah, so it's always important to enjoy the wine that you're having, but to be consciously processing it as you're drinking it, right?
Okay.
So, there are wines that are definitely meant to just slug back and not think about, and that's cool too.
Yep.
Those have a place. But when you're looking at, quote unquote, finer wines or more expensive wines, not that expense always means complexity, but this wine is $93 retail. Okay? Is it inexpensive? No. Is it expensive for champagne? No. Champagne's a wine of process, takes many years to make. So think about all that capital that's tied up in it, right? So it's actually a pretty reasonably priced champagne.
And it's delicious.
Yeah, it's delicious. So
we just want to put that on TikTok because they'll get really mad at us for saying that $93 for champagne is not that expensive.
well, it's all relative,
I know, I
right?
get
It's
it.
all relative.
It's funny though.
So when you taste it, you want to look at it, right, and appreciate the color of it. You can look at, in this case, the effervescence, and then you want to swirl it in the glass. That's probably the most important thing. So the way that we experience anything through taste is we smell it, right, first, and then we taste it. And this works with food and beverages where our olfactory is a much, much more powerful tool. So this is a cluster of nerves in this organ that's tucked kind of behind our forehead, essentially, or in our nose septum, that is incredibly powerful, okay? And actually, a lot of new science is coming out to show that we actually have a much more powerful sense of smell than we initially had thought. Everyone, the science always said that, like, dogs have a way higher sensitivity than we do, and they still have a higher sensitivity, but not as much as we initially thought. And there's so much that goes in the smell in terms of, like, life, like attraction to other people and things that we don't even know we're smelling, but we are smelling and are informing our decisions and our feelings and all sorts of things. So it's really important to smell wine as a result of that. So you want to swirl it in the glass because luckily this unctuous liquor has alcohol in it, right? Thank goodness. So when we're swirling it in the glass, what's happening is that alcohol is evaporating off the sides of the glass, and it's bringing all these esters and aromas to our olfactory. Okay? So you want to swirl it, then you want to smell it, then you want to taste it, and when you taste it, you want to swish it all around your mouth, almost like Listerine or mouthwash, because different components of the wine will affect your palate in different ways. And when we are tasting it, we're experiencing things like tannin and acid, like we talked about before, but also all those aromas that we smell that are now being confirmed on our palate and also informing our olfactory through what's called the retronasal. So there's a different pathway to that olfactory bulb, which is through the back of our mouth and up. So there's one way through, our noses, and then there's a different way through our mouth. And you will get different aromas and flavors depending on which pathway the wine is going. So it's really important to kind of focus on that too. Wow. Don't overthink it, but it's just something that you will get more out of your wine
I just
from.
tasted hazelnut.
Yeah, for sure. And when people say things like hazelnut or whatever, even something as simple as lemon, which every white wine has, right? It may sound asinine, but actually, if you look at it from a chemical level, the chemical compounds that are responsible for the real things, such as the real lemon or the real hazelnut, those structures actually very similar, or what's found in wine is very similar to the real thing. So it's actually not a stretch to say, it's not like we're just imagining it and making it up. It's that the actual compounds in the wine are structured very, very similarly to the real deal. And that's the magic of wine, is that can emulate that. Like, Beer can do that to a degree, but it's not, I would argue, as versatile as wine is. I think wine is the most versatile thing to emulate other smells. And it evokes, like, smells are powerful to us, right? There are things that we smell that bring us back to childhood, right? Yeah. Something we experience.
Like your old truck.
Like my old truck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Yeah. So many
We're in a
things.
club together. Chevy C10 club. You wouldn't understand that.
No, I don't get it. No.
Okay.
It's the best club ever. I'm currently an honorary member, though, because I sold my truck, and I'm so sad about it. I know, but I'll get another one. I'll get another one. I know, I'd still need a ride in yours.
Oh, my gosh.
With a big block. Boom, boom.
So when you're smelling this, like, what do you smell when you get this? When you pull this up, you go,
I need more.
You're
because
gonna rip off like a bunch, I was reading a book about sommelier and like taking the test and everything, and people were like, oh, this isn't lemon, this is candied lemon. This is, like, there's so many different variables, and it was just insane. It was overwhelming. It was fun to listen to because it was so interesting, but it was. Is
that where you got your candied orange?
It was a lot.
From?
No, I got it from Sarah. Wrote it down on the paper.
I'd see her.
Dude, last week, we were testing
you
whiskey,
had notes?
and I go, well, that's a little candied orange. I read it off the paper, and Tyler goes, he looks right at me. He's like, dang.
Sarah's like, no, that's cupcake.
Yeah, no, it's called cupcake.
Yeah, talking about condition of fruit is really important. So to go back to a very easy note that I think most people can understand right off the rip, which is lemon in white wine. Most white wines, anyways, 95% white wines. Okay, so we start with lemon, but if we think about what different kinds of lemon there are, is this the classic, like, lemon that you use for cooking? I don't even know what the classic name for it is, to be honest, or is it a Meyer lemon, right? Because if you smell a Meyer lemon next to the traditional lemon, whatever the name is, it smells very different, right? Meyer lemon is more sweet citrusy. It's very floral, perfumed, whereas like classic lemon is just like more pure lemon, for lack of a better descriptor.
Stringent, maybe?
Yeah, astringent, if you think about the flavor, right? So when you think about the types of lemons or types of apples, maybe something easier to grasp onto if you haven't had a Meyer lemon. So if you take a taste of green apple next to a red apple, right?
Yes.
Totally different experiences. Even within red apples, there's a whole host of varieties, and they all have different flavors and aromas, right? Mm-hmm. So then we that's step one. Step two is then what has happened to that fruit? Is it underripe? Is it just ripe? Is it overripe? Is it starting to, is it kind of bruised? Has it been cooked? Has it been stewed? Has it been baked? Right? So there's a whole spectrum of fruit expression that also is kind of fun to think about because it really does vary from wine to wine, and that can tell you lots of things about winemaking or climate or vintage or whatever. What's more important is recognizing what you like in wine so that you can then go and seek that out and drink that, right? So to answer your initial question, Evan, so right off the bat, I get a lot of what we call autolytic character, which is just a nerdy term for all the things that are going on in sparkling wine and in this champagne, where it has been aged on its lees or dead yeast cells, the same yeast cells that made it a sparkling wine in the first place. Mm-hmm. So what you do with this is a two-step process. You make a still wine to start with after harvest. Then you blend all that together and make your style, right? Could be different varieties, different regions, whatever. Then you, construction going on. Awesome.
After the gunshots, yes.
Then you put all that wine back in a bottle, and you add more yeast and more sugar because that's the food for yeast, right? So you cap it off, so it's a sealed vessel now, and that yeast parties down, it eats all the sugar, and it poops out alcohol, CO2, and heat. All right, not a lot of heat in this case because we're not talking about a ton of sugar and whatnot. Heat's kind of the enemy of this stage. Okay. So then the yeast runs out of food and it dies, right? And it falls to the bottom of, in this case, the bottle, and then it goes through an enzymatic breakdown process that's called autolysis. And that enzymatic breakdown process lends those hazelnut things, toasted bread, yeast dough, brioche, smoke, there's a long list of descriptors that can include that.
I didn't get that, no.
Roasted mushrooms there, that can be from lees or from a slight oxygenation. A lot of factors there, but yeah, so that's what I get right off the bat. That for, just to sum it up, autolytic character. Then I get bruised tree fruits, so like yellow apple, almost like kind of slightly applesaucey, slightly cooked, slightly bruised, cooked lemon oil, lemon curd, hazelnuts. Also, there's like a saline, salty salt spray type thing, and there is almost this kind of like roasted chicken quality as well, like chicken fat, like schmaltzy. Yeah. Which is also, you listen to that descriptor, you're like, no wonder it can be paired with, meat, because you're getting a lot of savory things. And that's why I like this style of champagne, because it is very savory, actually.
It is. Damn, I wish I would have said chicken. Totally get the chicken.
I mean, the power suggestion is strong, right? But we often associate champagne and other sparkling wines with celebratory moments, and they can be, and it definitely can fill that role. But it's actually one of the most versatile wine styles out there, because there's so many choices that can be made during the winemaking process to make a very savory iteration of this, or to make a very bright, vibrant, cheerful, gluggable, more celebratory example. And then also the longer ages on cork, which is something that we don't think about often with champagne either, it will develop more complexity. So you can actually age champagne in your cellar like you could any other wine, and it will gain complexity with that time on cork. It moves a little bit slower because there's CO2 and things protecting the wine, but it still evolves over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. I've tasted champagne that is 50 plus years old.
Wow.
It's still delicious. This is a very different experience, and it's extremely savory, way less bubbly. It does lose some bubble after time, but that is something you can experiment with. And if you are listening to this and you're a collector, you can experiment with aging some champagne or sparkling wine. It doesn't need to be champagne. You can get a lot of really high quality sparkling wine from Cremant appellations in France, or from California, or whatever. There's sparkling wine made all over the world.
Yeah.
So,
wow, man,
Fun.
all the different
Delicious.
types of lemon. That was so interesting to hear. They could pull out all those different flavors, from the cooked to the oils to everything. Wow.
and then when you get on your palate, you feel the CO2, but that's not the main focus of the wine, right?
Wrong tube.
The focus of the wine here is that autolytic richness, is that kind of slightly baked cooked fruit, and then is acid, right? So you get this richness up front, and then you get the acid just kind of washes everything away. And after you swallow this, I mean, for me, I'm ready to take another sip, right? And this will have the same effect on the food. So we'll try it a little bit later with some food, and you'll see what I mean. But like this with anything fatty, even slightly smoky because of that autolytic character, that bruise character, is going to work really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
I already know what I'm going to do.
You know what you're gonna cook?
You're gonna make béarnaise?
Yeah, I'm going to whip up a little hollandaise.
Okay, a little hollandaise. I made a little blue cheese butter the other night. Very
You
easy.
made butter?
I churned the butter. Yeah, absolutely. I made my own butter. Yeah.
Shipped the cream.
No, I put blue cheese crumbles into butter with salt, pepper, and parsley.
And what'd you put that
Oh,
in?
a tenderloin.
Delightful.
Add it up a little bit,
Oh,
rich
you
it up a little bit.
Bougie ass.
No, I know. My wife will